Factors that influence biomes. Temperate rainforests have. Yeah, this is definitely definitely not in the notes that I went through. So, what do temperate rainforests have in common? They have things like large amounts of rainfall. So if you can just pick 3 sort of things that rainforests or temperate rainforests have, that would be good. This is page 2, Jesse. There was some blanks that we didn't get filled in through the notes, and Eric was just asking about it. And we just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page. Costin, the calendar from last week got taken down to put up the calendar for this week. So this is Unit 1 Science Learning Guide in the science course. You should print it off. If you don't want to print it off, come pick one up. All right, so just pick 3 things that happen in temperate rainforests in terms of temperature, precipitation. That'd be fine. Temperate rainforests have pretty consistent temperatures. They're not really high, not really low. It's a little cooler than a tropical rainforest. You could put something like that. Large amounts of rainfall. Temperate rainforests are always near a coastline and usually backed by mountains. So all of those things would work for those 3. Apologize for them not being in the notes. Was there any other blanks that you encountered that were not filled in by the notes? We could, as we're going through the first 18 pages now, and remember when we get into the biomes pages, it's just a bunch of writing and there's not really much on there. Everything on page 3. Supposing the average annual temperature, precipitation of a region, determine the biome, you would locate the intersection point of the 2. All right, so this was discussing how to use this little graph. Let's look at an example of a place that has an average annual temperature of 15 and average annual precipitation of 25. First locate 15 degrees Celsius on the, and then we need to figure out where that 15 degrees Celsius was. So that's on the bottom axis. I could just put in bottom, I suppose. I can get my pen fired up here. Maybe not. Am I in OneNote? I'm going to have to flip this computer. So the first blank should be bottom or x-axis. Those would both work. And move up until you reach 25, average annual precipitation. And then on the top of the next page, top of page 4, the intersection point indicates that the biome is in the which region. So you just got to look on the graph and figure out where that is. So that was kind of a little bit of you needing to think, I suppose. Other stuff, Eric? Or is it all kind of just little stuff like that that you could probably figure out if you really put your mind to it? The instant practice we did together, latitude, should be good. All right, is there anything else in the notes that I haven't covered on the first 18 pages that's extremely pressing, you can't possibly figure out, that you want to look at? Anything at all? No go? All right. I would like to continue on with the new section. So this is 1.2 ecosystems. This starts on page. Scroll down here. That's biome still. Some practice. You guys did your climatographs already. So your page numbers are now going to be a little bit different than mine. But this is what it looks like. 1.2 notes ecosystems. Can somebody put into chat what page that starts in your learning guide? I took some stuff out of the learning guide to make it a little bit different, to take the chromatograph out of the learning guide. It used to be built in. 24. Does anyone disagree with page 24 in your learning guide? My learning guide is probably, yeah, so mine's 28. All right, so you guys are on page 24, and the idea here is that when you get to the end of a section, as this is our first section we've completed in our learning guide, so when you get to, this should be the same page for you guys. Page 19 has the matching. And then page where it says practice. So this is just kind of practice questions for you to do on your own. So that's page, your page 19. And then this chromatograph stuff is in there. And then where it asks you to actually draw a chromatograph, I made that a separate assignment on its own. There's my chromatograph. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And then there's some questions there. And then there was a table, I believe. Brief summary of terrestrial biomes. So in a few words, yeah, Costin, you missed a week of class, man. Of course you have no idea what it is. Did you do any of the stuff while you were gone? No. Well, it's just like, if I was sitting here teaching you stuff you already knew, what would be the point of school? It's all new, Costin, all new. So Costin, my suggestion to you is watch the videos, and you are indeed behind a week, so you'll have to get some stuff done. We got Kira, lost Kira. Oh well. So this table should maybe be on page 23 of your learning guide, I'm going to guess. Maybe 22 and 23. If my counting skills don't leave me high and dry. So basically it's just a summary for you to kind of organize all of the biomes into, one place. So, 4 biomes on this page. You have permanent ice, tundra, grasslands, desert. Where in Canada can the biome be found, if anywhere? And then temperature, precipitation, animals. Example of an animal adaptation. So these are obviously very small boxes. I'm not expecting an essay for each one. Just a few words. Temperature, permanent ice. You could put like below -5 degrees Celsius year round. Precipitation, you could put in values like, 0 to 20 millimeters per month, something like that. Animals, examples of adaptations of animals. So animals that live in the permanent ice, what's special about them? They either have really thick fur to stay warm, thick layers of fat to stay warm, things like that. So you don't have to write a paragraph in each little box, just a few words to kind of, just summarize all of the 8 biomes. And, you have 4 on this page, and then you have 4 on the next page. Boreal forest, temperate deciduous forest, temperate rainforest, and tropical rainforest. Obviously, no tropical rainforest in Canada. So there's the other 4 biomes on this next page. Does anybody have any questions on how to fill out this little chart? Any boxes you're confused by, don't understand? Okay. So we're here. Jesse tells me this is page 24 in your learning guide. I will go through this now. Maybe. Get to the right place. There we go. All right, so this is ecosystems. I guess we could look at this little diagram. We have 8 terrestrial biomes. So biomes, we have the biosphere, which is the full Earth. A biome is broken down into kind of like, we break them down into 8. And then if we go a little bit smaller than the biome, we get into something called an ecosystem. So ecosystem and then habitat is even smaller than that. And so we're going to talk about ecosystems. So by studying ecosystems now and in the past, we can better understand what may happen in the future. If we can figure out, what is kind of going on in different environments, different amounts of rainfall, precipitation, things like that, we can figure out how that's going to look in the future. So that's important. Ecosystems made up of many parts. So far we've talked about the living things, the biotic factors, plants, animals, and the abiotic factors. So ecosystems can take up a hectare of land. They can be huge, like kilometer by kilometer, very large ecosystems, or it can be very small, like an old log. And these are the, just depending on what's living there. Some organisms like humans, large mammals are big, so they take up lots of area. If we're talking something small like a bacteria or something like a small ant, their ecosystem is going to be a lot smaller than something like a human. So we talk about a habitat, you have biome, or I guess biosphere, biome, ecosystem, habitat, and then we get even smaller. So the habitat of red fox often includes edges of forest or marshlands. What are some abiotic factors in ecosystems? What are some non-living things that influence what an ecosystem looks like? Throw it into chat. What would cause an ecosystem, let's say, outside of my door to look different than an ecosystem in Africa that isn't living? So we're not talking about plants or animals. What would some things be that would affect what these things look like? Weather. Perfect. So weather is extremely important, and we could break down weather into several different things. So let's go more specific than weather. You're very, very correct with weather, though. What things make up weather if we had to make weather smaller? Because you are temperature. Perfect. I like it. So temperature is a big one. That is a very important abiotic factor. What are some other important abiotic factors? You could probably break weather down into several of them, but temperature is a big one. What other non-living things would influence how things interact in a biome? So temperature, precipitation, those are the two big ones that we kind of break our biomes down by. Yes. What else? Think about weather. What is it doing outside right now that it hasn't been doing since like September? Kind of. Temperature, precipitation, big two. Snow. It's not snowing out right now, I hope. I think I'm done with the snow. So precipitation can come in rainfall or snow. We can go either one of those. Somebody look out your window right now. What is up in the sky, that big bright thing up there? It's a kind of bright in the sky, flaming ball. What do we call that thing? The sun. Yes, the sun. So we have temperature, we have precipitation, we have sun. I haven't seen the sun in a while. I guess it was out yesterday. So sun, that's a non-living thing, and it has a huge effect on what lives somewhere. So if you are in northern Canada in the middle of winter, you don't see the sun. Things aren't growing. You need sun to grow. We are, lucky to get lots of sun in the summer. That means we have really great growing season here in the Okanagan. So, temperature, precipitation, sunshine. How much sun? What are some other non-living things that would influence the biomes? Temperature, precipitation, sun. We got 3. Is there more? Maybe that's it. Maybe that's all there is. Okay, what do plants grow in? What do plants need to grow? Surely we can think of more than 3. Remember when I was a little kid? Water, precipitation, dirt. Ali, thank you. Yeah, soil. Soil, very important. Non-living, generally speaking, but it has nutrients in it that plants and animals need to live. My story was when I was little, we would sit in class and my teacher, I don't remember which one, she would always say, okay class, let's put our thinking caps on. I feel like we need our thinking caps on right now. So non-living things, we've got a few big ones. We got weather, which we broke down in temperature, precipitation, sunshine, dirt, so we got soil, we did that one. Water, we got that one. Sunshine, we got that one. Oxygen. How many of us would live without it? Is anybody photosynthetic out there? Or we're all going to use some O2 to survive. So plants and animals, it kind of seems a little silly because we know that plants generally need carbon dioxide, but plants also need a little bit of oxygen to survive. So we need oxygen. Without oxygen, things don't survive. Carbon dioxide. Plants that you eat. I don't know, anybody eaten an apple lately? Anything that grows on a tree, plant, it's taking carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and creating sugar out of it essentially, or carbohydrates, and we eat it. So we need carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, else plants die. That would be sad. And then temperature we came up with. So we got most of them. Two big ones that we kind of missed, oxygen, carbon dioxide. Those are important. Abiotic factors, including oxygen, water, nutrients, light, and soil. These are the big ones. Obviously, light is required for photosynthesis. Anytime we have something growing using sunlight, it's taking the sun's energy, it's taking carbon dioxide, and it's converting it into something which it needs, like a leaf or a piece of fruit or a seed. Certain microorganisms convert solar energy into food, usable by living things. Oxygen is produced when plants undergo photosynthesis, and we need oxygen. Taste that oxygen, it's great. Nice fresh air. Water is necessary for all life on our planet. We need water. Nutrients, we didn't talk about too much, but nitrogen, phosphorus, carbon dioxide, oxygen, these are kind of the big ones that plants need to survive. Without nitrogen, phosphorus, plants don't survive. So soil not only contains water and nutrients, but it's home to many plants and animals. There you go. So even though soil isn't necessarily something that all plants or animals need, a lot of the food we eat comes from plants that grow in soil. So those are abiotic interactions. Remember, abiotic, non-living. Now we're going to talk about some biotic interactions. Biotic would mean living. Kira, did we get you sorted out with the old audio issues? Tried your phone there. How'd that work? It's working? Good. No, that's all good. No worries. Biotic interactions. So we have a nice little picture here of nice forest, stream, some green stuff growing, some trees. What are some biotic interactions in this ecosystem? What are some living things that are interacting, not necessarily in this ecosystem, but in any ecosystem? Anywhere. Could be in your backyard, could be North Pole, could be the high plains of the Himalayas in Central Asia. Interactions between living things. You are alive. Have you interacted with anything in your ecosystem lately, and how did you interact with it? There's no right or wrong answer here. Perhaps you walked on moss. Kaylin, brilliant. That's a living interaction. You are a living thing, Kaylin. I hope you might be a robot, I'm not sure, but you are living. You stepped on moss. That was an interaction between living things. Jenny, you pet your dog. There you go. Your ghost. Ooh. I always would have guessed you were a robot, Kaylin, not a ghost. So you pet your dog. You're a living thing, Jenna. Your dog's a living thing. That was an interaction. All right. We got two. Walking on moss, petting a dog. Any other interactions in your house with other living things? Or formerly living things? Anyone eaten any food recently in the last 20 days or so. Was any of it alive? You maybe took in some nutrients. Anybody have a good steak lately? Anybody eat some cow? I had tacos on, what night was it? Saturday night, I think. Love me my tacos. You had steak last night. A robot ghost eating steak. All right, so you ate a cow, Kaylin. Do we have any vegetarians in the house? Any vegetarians? Not that I'm judging you on your vegetarianism. Madison is. I wish I was a vegetarian. It's really good for the environment. And you're vegan, Ali. That's tremendous. If you can do that, you're doing it for Lent. Cool. Vegan's a whole nother level. I like cheese too much, I think, to be vegan. My wife always cooks me vegan meals, and then I put cheese on them and ruin them. All right, so vegetarians eat vegetables. Vegetables are living things. So these are some biotic interactions. Although it seems kind of silly, you're eating plants and you're eating animals, unless you're Ali and Madison, who choose not to eat animals. So you have constant interaction with living things in your environment. Now, obviously our sort of interactions with living things look different than if we were kind of wilderness people, living in Canada, First Nations people, maybe kind of like, 2,000 years ago. What sort of interactions would we have with living things in our environment? What would those look like? You would have to hunt or gather food. Food would be hunting you. Things like bears and cougars. You look very tasty to a cougar that's hungry. So when we talk about living things, biotic interactions inside an ecosystem, we talk about a community. So right now we live in different communities. I live in Kelowna. Some of you guys maybe live in like West Kelowna or wherever you live, here or abroad. Abbotsford. There you go. That's your community. Living things, organisms are interacting in that community. So that's community. Here is a community and a population at the same time. So a population refers to all of the members of a certain species within an ecosystem. In this particular ecosystem, we have these tortoise, or is it tortoises? What's the plural of tortoise? Tortoises? Doesn't sound right, but I think it might be. So it's population. We can talk about the population of Kelowna. We can talk about the population of ants in your backyard. That's population. All the members of a certain species within an ecosystem. But then we talk about species. What does a species mean? We can have different types of species. A species is an organism within an ecosystem that has the same structure and they can reproduce with one another. That's kind of the key idea of a species. If you can reproduce, you are a species. So we can talk about the different species of salmon. You have Chinook, chum, sockeye, coho, pink. These all live off, do they all live off the BC coast? I believe they do. Pacific salmon species, yes. So these are the different species of salmon. Chinooks, chum, sockeye, coho, and pink. Salmon species. We have human species. We could have different species of things like dogs and cats. What happens when you cross species? Anyone ever thought of what happens when you cross, different types of animals that aren't supposed to be able to breed properly? Because when we define species, we say that they can reproduce with one another. Is anybody familiar with some species that can't reproduce? Alien species. How about this guy? Anyone ever seen? I've never seen one other than this picture. Anyone know what this is called? Kaylin, you got it. It's a liger. Anyone ever heard of a liger before? Because it is exactly what it sounds like. All right, if we take two species, tiger, lion, they kind of look the same. Napoleon Dynamite. How many people have seen Napoleon Dynamite? That's a bit of an older show now, I guess. Came out when I was probably your age. Pretty goofy show. A liger. I think that was Napoleon's favorite animal. So a tiger and a lion, different species. If you breed them, you get a liger. And ligers are actually not a new species because they miss one major roadblock in being called a species. Ligers can't reproduce. They are sterile. Now, ligers aren't very common, but you guys have maybe seen these before. A mule. So, has anybody heard of a mule before? They're quite common. If you've maybe watched old westerns and things like that. Okay, a mule, yeah. Does anyone know why mules are a thing? Like, why would we breed a horse and a donkey together to get a mule? What is special about a mule? So mules are half donkey, half horse. If you breed a horse and a donkey together, you get a mule. And mules aren't species because they cannot reproduce. They are sterile. Last year we had a bunch of equestrian girls in the program, and they knew what was so special about mules. Well, not special, I shouldn't say like there's anything special about them, but why would a mule be desirable? It was for working animals, for sure, Kaylin, you got it. So mules, like basically horses are kind of smart, and donkeys are like really stupid. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've never met a donkey before that is really smart, I guess I should say. So horses are like too smart to do like really remedial tasks like just carry stuff. And donkeys were just not real good listeners. But if you breed a donkey and a horse together, you get a mule. And mules are very strong because they're kind of like half horse, half donkey. They can carry things, they can do lots of work, and they're, not super dumb, so you can ask them to do things like follow you, and they'll do that. And they're not really stubborn like donkeys. So we used to use mules to pack things over long distances because they were strong like horses and kind of easy to work with. But sterile, because species like a horse and a species like a donkey, you can breed them together to get a mule, but mules can't reproduce, so they are not a unique species. You rode a mule in Mexico. Yeah, they're good for just carrying things around, and they're good at following, things like that. Your friend had a donkey and it came out knocking people over, showing it loved you. Yeah, so I don't know. Donkeys, I don't gather, are very smart animals. I don't know any donkeys though. So organisms can have many types of relationships in a population. So we have a population of humans in Kelowna or wherever you live. Humans can interact with other species, and other species can interact with one another, and we can define their interactions into kind of three categories. So commensalism is an interaction where one species gets some sort of benefit and the other species isn't harmed, but it isn't helped. So one just doesn't care and one gets a benefit. Mutualism is an interaction where two species both benefit. So we'll look at some examples of these in a second. And parasitism, you guys have probably heard the word parasite before, but parasitism is where one species receives some great benefit and then the other species receives a harm as a result. So generally speaking, all interactions can be put into these three categories. Commensalism, one species benefits, the other isn't harmed or hurt. Mutualism, both species benefit, and then parasitism is where one species benefits and one is harmed. We'll come back to those in a second. Niche is kind of I don't want to say a difficult sort of word to describe, but a niche is what role an organism plays within its environment. Now, when we think of kind of humans and our interactions, we aren't really good at filling niches. We're just good at ruining things. But if you were to look at an ecosystem like in your yard or an untouched forest somewhere, grassland, savanna, where animals and organisms are interacting constantly, we could figure out where an organism fits into a niche. Now, if there is no niche for an organism to fit into, generally the organism will just die off in that ecosystem. It's just not cut out for it. But if we start to look at why an organism lives where it does and why it's able to kind of thrive where it is, it's because it usually fills a niche, meaning there's these big trees like the one in the image here. You have this tree, it grows, and there's different aspects of this tree that provide sort of life. You have these roots down at the bottom. The roots are recycling nutrients, they're sucking nutrients out of the soil. There's bacteria and things living on the roots themselves. That's a niche. You have the trunk of the tree. You have specific insects that live under the bark. They live and burrow into the trunk. That's their niche. And then you have other plants and animals that live in the branches of the tree. That's their niche. Things like birds who eat the nuts that the tree provides and spread the seeds around, things like that. So these are all the niches where organisms live. So how an organism fits into its environment, physically, chemically, and biologically, is what a niche is. Competition. What do organisms compete for? What do we think? Organisms competing for something. You're an organism. You live in the wild. You're not a human. Pretend you're something else. What do you need to survive? Why would you need to compete for things? Or I should say, what would you need to compete for? So food's a big one for sure. Organisms need more than just food to survive though. Does anyone remember what organisms need for survival? Food's a big one though, for sure. You're going to have to compete for food. If you are not a good hunter, you're going to die. Water, also important for survival. So very important, food, water. Territory, good one, Josh. So you need, organisms need space. Not all organisms can just live in a tiny little sort of petri dish. A mate, so you need to compete for a mate to reproduce. That is generally speaking the goal of all organisms, is to reproduce, to pass on your genetic information. Usually it can be alpha animals. Yeah, so a lot of species of animals have kind of a leader, alpha. So there is competition to become that alpha. And once you're the alpha, you get to breed with whoever is in your harem. So that is why you would want to become an alpha. But there's competition for that position. So we have food, water, territory, mate. I like those. Those are good. Which ones did I have? A competition occurs when a resource is desired by two or more individuals. Usually when resources are limited. So we got food, water, sunlight sometimes for plants. Habitat, that was kind of like territory, Josh, same idea, just a different word. And if you have the lack of a vital resource, that's going to limit the size and the health of the individual. And it can limit the size of the population. Let's say there is a population of blue jays, and they live near an acorn tree. I have no idea if blue jays eat acorns, but I'm just going to make it up. If that acorn tree, all of a sudden, there's not a very, it's not a very sunny summer, it's a cold summer. The acorn tree doesn't produce many acorns. Now all of these blue jays are trying to eat the acorns, but there's not very many. Well, that, the fact that that food is limited, that can limit the amount of blue jays that can live, because if you can't have food, you die. And that's a problem. So you can, limit populations because of a lack of a resource. So that was competition. I'm going to just rewind a second because this is just throwing a lot of vocab at you, but we talked about biotic interactions. We talked about the three main types of biotic interactions: commensalism, mutualism, parasitism. So these are living things that are interacting. So those are living things interacting. Then we can talk about competition, and we can talk about predation as being a form of kind of competition. So predation is a relationship between the eaters, the predators, and the eaten, or the prey. So you have a predator-prey relationship. This is different than the three different type of biotic interactions. So we can have commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. In all three of these examples, the two organisms or more that are interacting generally survive. But when we talk about a sort of interaction where something doesn't survive, we call it predation. So when one organism is eating all or part of another, that is a predator-prey relationship. So predators have adaptations to allow them to, hunt, try to capture their prey. So generally speaking, some organisms have really good sense of sight or good sense of smell or good hearing, very sharp teeth possibly, camouflage so the organisms won't see them coming. We can talk about things like leopard spots that are, break-up sort of patterns, intelligence, speed, strength. And then we have prey that have adaptations to help them survive. So we can talk about something like a porcupine. Porcupine has these quills that, animals will generally stay away from porcupines because they don't want to get hurt. You could talk about things like shells, poisons. So something like a poison dart tree frog living in a rainforest is poisonous, very brightly colored, doesn't need to hide. It wants to show everyone where it is and say, hey, I am a funny color. Be careful of me because I will kill you if you eat me. So something like a tree frog that's brightly colored doesn't need to camouflage into its environment because it's poisonous. It has this adaptation, it has this defense mechanism. A lot of other animals will camouflage into their environment, and that will help them survive. So like a snowshoe hare in the tundra, it's a small hare. It's completely white in the winter, so it blends in with the snow, hard to see. There's a predator-prey relationship, and they influence one another. And there is always questions on tests about predator-prey relationships. So we're going to look at an example of what that is here now. All right, so this is the predator-prey relationship between a wolf population and a moose population. And the blue line represents the wolves and the red line represents the moose. And you can see on the chart along the bottom, it isn't listed by like day or month or year. It's listed by generation. So we're talking longer periods of time. Generally the generations of moose and wolves are pretty close to the year, but they can be a bit different, I guess. And then you have the number over on this side here. So number of wolves, and then on the other side you have number of moose. So the higher you go up the food chain, the lower the numbers exist. So notice in this ecosystem, the population of wolves varies between 0 and 60. That's not a lot. But the population of moose varies between 0 and almost 2,400. So there's thousands of moose in a given area, and there's very few wolves. So the higher you go up an ecosystem, the higher you get in terms of, can't even think of the word. The higher you get in the food chain, the lower the numbers are. So one very important thing about this graph is that the blue line always follows the red line. So let's look right in this kind of like second generation maybe. So you have the moose population, it's low, and then the moose population, jumps up here. And then it starts to go down. And as we look at the red line increase, just behind it, you get this blue line that's also increasing, but just after it. So what's really going on in the world here? Well, as spring rolls around, a bunch of moose are born, so the population increases. The wolves have more food, so their numbers increase as well. Because there's more food, more wolves are born, and then what happens here? Well, why doesn't the moose population just keep going up? Well, the wolves start eating the moose, and the moose population starts to go down. And then as the moose population drops, so does the wolf because there's less food. And this cycle just continues on for generation after generation. The prey numbers increase, all of a sudden there's more food, so the predators are eating the moose eating, and then the numbers of moose drop off because you get things like, winter coming, or the wolves are eating more of them. So then the wolf population increases, there's more food, but then they start eating too much, and then the wolves drop down. And it's just this constant up and down between the populations. As the moose goes up, the wolf goes up. As the moose goes down, the wolf kind of follows it. So the predator is always just a half step behind in terms of the population numbers of the prey. So that was a graph of wolf and moose. This is going to be wolf and caribou just for the sake of this discussion. But you can see in the province of BC, obviously it's not a jumbo-sized picture, but there's different types of caribou that live in BC. So you have the southern mountain caribou, you have all of this caribou living in British Columbia. And then if we look at the large map we'll look at the small map. Here's the populations of caribou that live in BC, kind of in the interior, and this dotted line is the southernmost reaches of that populations. And then the other chart here shows the concentrations of wolves in BC. So high density is blue, low density is green. We don't have a ton of wolves in the Okanagan Valley, and you can see even where we live right here in the Okanagan, there are no wolves, but you get a little bit out of the valley, the density is a little lower, and then you get up into the interior of BC where the wolf population gets very dense. So the populations overlap. Now, last year, this was September of 2015, so yeah, it was kind of like last year and a half ago. There was a wolf cull, which means that the province of British Columbia wanted to go in, and they actually did, go into these areas and kill off a bunch of wolves, because wolves are predators and they were killing too many caribou. The caribou numbers were getting very, very low, and the wolf numbers were still kind of high. And then along comes Miley Cyrus, and Miley Cyrus says, "Hey BC, stop killing wolves, that's not nice." And she was like in the news, she came to visit BC and, kind of stand up for wolves. So the figures here, I'll just read. I was going to send you links to this, but I don't have chat on this computer. In 2015, 84 wolves were killed between January and April. So they were killed by humans to help help increase the populations of caribou in these areas. In the 5 years between 2015 and 2020, they wanted to kill, I think, something like 200 wolves or something. Basically, they fly in a helicopter, they see a wolf, they shoot it, and they just leave it for other animals to eat. So that's the wolf cull. Because the habitat of the caribou is getting so low. When was this? This was last year, 2015, September 2015. So we're actually in the middle of this wolf cull. So Miley Cyrus gets in the news, she says, "Stop killing wolves, it's such a bad thing, just killing animals needlessly, please don't." So that was that. On the other side of the coin was a conservation group. So conservation groups are generally in favor of conserving, animals and wildlife and habitats and things like that. And they said, this wolf cull is really necessary. This is the same news outlet, so CBC. And the conservation group is called Wild Sight, talking about South Selkirk region, so kind of in the Kootenays, and up into the Peace, which is kind of central BC. The province wants to kill up to 184 wolves to help the populations of caribou increase. So they're saying it's a really good thing to kill all these wolves so these caribou will live. So here is the thing. You have, different animals have different niches within their habitats. Wolves eat caribou and deer and elk. If the wolf population decreases, then the caribou and deer population and moose population increase. If you have too many wolves, they basically keep these other animals in check. If they run out of food, the wolves die. The problem is it's not just as easy as killing wolves and then the caribou just live. There's other animals that are competing with these caribou for these resources. So my question to you, no right or wrong answer, no judgment here. Green check mark, do you think is appropriate for this wolf call to continue? Or red X, do you think that the wolf call is completely warranted because the caribou are starting to kind of decline or go extinct almost in BC? Not extinct, but their numbers are very, very low in their traditional habitats. You have to have an opinion. You can't sit on the fence. You got to go with one. There's no right or wrong answer here. What do we think? I love how it's very kind of 50-50 here. You got to pick one. Support the wolf call to help the caribou survive, or we just let nature run its course. Kaylin, we're waiting on you. There we go. What did we get? 5-7. So most people are opposed to the wolf call. It's good. A lot of people are in support of it, which is good too. I was going to discuss the actual merits of the news story here that Miley Cyrus starts, saying that the wolf call is bad and really question whether this was newsworthy. What does Miley Cyrus know about culling wolves? That's my question. Is she like an ecologist or an environmentalist? Like, does she have a degree in wolf studies? Why does it matter? Who cares about Miley Cyrus? I won't go there. And then we talked about this conservation group. At least the conservation group has a little bit of credibility to it. There's lots of interesting discussions we could have about the credibility of news sources, especially in the times we live in now where news isn't necessarily credible anymore. I just want maybe one sentence as to why you voted the way you did. Was your vote based on facts, or was your vote based on kind of your emotions? And can you support your opinion with evidence? Is there something in either one of those stories that caused you to decide what you wanted to do? And is your evidence based on fact, or is your evidence based on opinion? Do you just think like, I just think that killing things is bad? Is that kind of an emotional decision? I could see someone, I don't mean to pick on Ali and Madison, like vegetarians. You have different views. Like you've chosen not to eat animals. So there's many reasons why you could possibly choose to not eat an animal, whether it's an ethical thing or whether it's a nutritional thing. Maybe that kind of influences your decision a little bit. You think it's all right, Connor, because you don't want things to get out of proportion as well. The environmental group supported it. So we had an environmental group supporting it. Connor, I agree, and I believe you've used some evidence to support your decision. Interesting though, what do we know about the environmental group? Are they a long-standing environmental group, or is it just a bunch of kind of guys in their basement saying like, hey, killing wolves is bad? Did anyone check to make sure this was a important environmental group that actually done good work? Something to think about, Connor. Jenica, the way they kill the wolves is unhumane, for sure. Shooting them from a helicopter. There's not a lot of ethical, considerations. If you're a hunter in BC, you have to, go through a hunting program and things like that. They talk a lot about hunting ethics, and killing things from a helicopter is not an ethical way, but it's efficient. That's kind of why they do it. So, good point, Jenica. I like that. Caribou could come endangered, so within the region, yeah. Very good point, Eric. And I would say that's not kind of, I won't comment further on that. Let nature take its course. Humans coming into the things usually ends up with more animals dead. Jesse, I would tend to agree with you. Humans wreck almost everything all the time. So that's a very, very good point as well, Jesse. I like that. Josh is supporting keeping the wolf population in check, but I can't argue with just killing for the sake of killing, at least use the meat and fur. I should mention, I guess this is maybe my opinion, but when the province kills wolves from helicopters, they leave the wolves there because it supports the ecosystem further. But I would agree with you, that is, you could use the fur, sell it or whatnot. So, animals die in the forest all the time, we just don't see it. But there you go. The wolf culling is good, but the way they do it is pretty cruel and brutal. Just shoot and leave it for dead. Yeah. The wolf population would start to slow down and allow the caribou to repopulate unless caribou are going extinct. We shouldn't disrupt nature. I like that, Leeds. And one thing I will add that I didn't, we didn't have time to read both news articles, but basically the news articles were saying that the population, the environment that the caribous live in, so their habitat is starting to be encroached on by humans. So that was kind of a big part of why they're culling them, because their habitat's shrinking and then the wolves are eating them. So you're kind of running really low on the numbers. Jenna, I disagree with it because everything happens for a reason. Humans usually mess things up when it comes to this, like when they put the shrimp in Okanagan Lake. Yes, so Jenna and Jesse are both on the kind of the same page. So a lot of times humans will introduce a species to try to fix a problem, and then that species becomes the problem in itself. There is literally countless examples of humans trying to influence ecosystems by introducing a new species, and that species ruining things. And we'll look at many, many more of those. All right, I like those. Those are some very good opinions, and there you go. Now, a bunch of people just, shared what they thought. Does anyone want to change their opinion? Does anyone want to go from the no wolf cull to the wolf cull side, or vice versa? We all kind of like where we're at. Or does anyone feel more strongly about their choice? Did somebody say something you're like, yeah, that really makes sense. I agree with them. There's no right or wrong answer here. You agree with Leeds, that's good. Leeds was very articulate in her reasoning. I would agree with that as well. Interesting. I mean, it is what it is, and it's important that you have an opinion and that you're able to support your opinion with facts, evidence, and I would caution you supporting your opinion with things like belief, when you're forming opinion, but especially in a science context. The wolves would probably kill us if they could. We're literally destroying the planet. We are. I think that is, Ali, you bring up a really good point, that everything we do in Science 10, in the biology unit at least, is you could just kind of summarize it into how humans ruin things in general. That is what we look at in Science 10. How we mess things up so badly for everything else that lives on this planet. And this is just an example of, humans build houses into the environment where these caribou live. Now all of a sudden the caribou population's declining and we're like, oh shucks, how are we going to deal with that? Let's kill some wolves, because wolves eat caribou, less wolves, more caribou, everyone wins. It's not really the root of the problem. We have this habitat loss is causing, populations of caribou to decline. Are we really, dealing with the root cause, or are we just trying to fix it by killing more animals? Yeah, we should be able to do this. We'll finish off with symbiosis. There's a few examples here. So symbiosis is a relationship between members of two different species living in close association with one another. So we talked about commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. So we're going to look at these more in depth, the three big ones, and then we'll call it a day. So commensalism is a symbolic relationship where one species benefits and the other species is neither harmed nor benefited. So the example here we have, I believe that's a water buffalo, and the white bird, I think it's an egret. And what is their relationship? Well, this water buffalo is a water buffalo and has thick fur and a hide, and in the fur lots of bugs live. And then you have this bird just kind of hanging out. It's got somewhere to stand. It can see predators coming. It's safe. Is the water buffalo really affected by the bird, either positively or negatively? Not really. But the bird has a place to stand and a place to kind of live and see things. Maybe it sees something it wants to eat. It'll go fly and eat it, come back. So this is kind of an example of commensalism. One species, the egret, the white bird here, is benefited. It has a place to stand and look and live. The water buffalo is just kind of like, meh, I'm a water buffalo. I don't really care if you live up there. So there's many, many different examples of commensalism. Mutualism. Mutualism is a symbolic relationship where both species benefit. A famous example, I don't know if it's famous, but an example is between bees and flowers. So bees pollinate flowers, so the flowers get pollinated, which means they can reproduce, and then the bees take the pollen and they make honey out of it. You know why these little GIFs load so slowly? This one here is a scuba diver, and this is a shrimp, and he's opening his mouth and the shrimp goes in and starts cleaning out his teeth, taking any parasites out. And that's an example of mutualism. The guy is getting his teeth cleaned and the shrimp is getting a little snack. The one on the bottom right here is the cursor just not even in the right world. These little fish, has anyone seen us or heard of this? It's a spa treatment where you go and you put your feet in these tubs with these fish, and the fish kind of eat at your feet and they take all the dead skin off your feet. It's actually a real thing. When I was in Thailand, I was swimming, snorkeling, and I had a little scrape on my leg where I had a little like a scab sort of thing where I had fallen. And I was swimming, and then this little fish comes over and starts picking at my leg. Same type of fish that are here in the spa. And it was eating the dead skin off of my leg. So it was getting a meal. I was getting cleaned up. We were both benefiting. So that's mutualism. It's a form of symbiosis. So symbiosis is the three, and mutualism is this interaction where both are benefited. And then kind of one you might be familiar with is the clownfish and the anemone. The anemone provides a home for the clownfish, and the clownfish actually brings food back to feed the anemone. And the anemone, yeah, Nemo, you got it. And the anemone has these kind of like stingers on it, and the clownfish actually has a special mucus layer on its outside that allows it to live here, but no other fish have that special mucus layer, so no other fish can live in the anemone because they'll get stung and killed. So mutualism at its finest. So we did commensalism. One was benefited, the other didn't really care. Mutualism, both are benefited. And then the third one is parasitism. And this is where one species benefits and the other is harmed. And the kind of tricky thing here is parasitism is really kind of almost closely related. I shouldn't say it's related because I don't want you to think of them as being related, but students often confuse parasitism with predator-prey relationship because it seems like the parasites are eating part or all of the host, but that's not really the case. So you have the honeybee and these little mites that live on them. That is an example of parasitism because the mites aren't really eating the bee. They're kind of living on the bee and, snacking on them a little bit, but they're not actually, consuming part of the bee. So that is what distinguishes them from a predator-prey relationship. The next one is the mosquito, and the mosquito is a really great example of a parasite. Does anyone know why mosquitoes consume blood? Does anyone know why it's important that they eat blood? Or I guess I shouldn't say eat blood because they're not eating the blood. They are jerks, Jesse. I'm with you. I don't like mosquitoes. Mosquitoes consume blood because It's actually only the female mosquito that consumes the blood because they need it to reproduce. So they need it to make eggs. That's why they take the blood. So they're not eating it, but they kind of consume it to produce offspring. And then the third example, this is another one from the Planet Earth series. There's this fungus that infects these special types of ants. So in the rainforest, specific organisms kind of live in close relationships with one another. Cordyceps, you got it, Kaylin. There's literally hundreds of different types of cordyceps fungus, and this is just one of them. But basically what happens is this fungus gets into the ant, and the ant goes crazy. And the ant just needs to climb to the tallest, highest place it can. And then once it gets there, it dies. And this cordyceps fungus, kind of like a mushroom almost, it starts growing out of the ant's head. And then, I don't know if you guys know a lot about mushrooms and things like that, fungus, but they release spores. So when the ant climbs really high, so when it releases spores, the spores can go over greater distances, and it basically kills the ant with this awesome protrusion-like thing out of its head, which is frightening in a whole scary level. So basically in the rainforest, there's all these really, really cool, intricate interactions between an organism and a parasite. So this is the cordyceps. And there's cordyceps fungus that will affect different animals like moths and things like that. If you've ever seen Planet Earth, they do a whole little section on it. It's just amazing. So a really good parasite won't kill its host. If you are a bad parasite, you end up killing your host. That's not a good thing, because if you kill your host, then you no longer have whatever thing you needed. So if you're, this little mite on the bumblebee, that's your place to live. You're, eating some part of this bee, you kill it, now you got to find a new place to live. You aren't a good parasite. You killed your host. Mosquitoes are really great at this because they don't really kill the things that they're taking the blood from. They just, annoy them. The cordyceps is a whole nother level. I think I'm going to leave, I only got one slide left. We'll finish this off then. So biodiversity refers to the variety of number of different individuals and species in an ecosystem. We generally talk about ecosystems' health by looking at how many organisms live in that ecosystem. So the more organisms that live in a place, we talk about it being more healthy or having a high biodiversity. Most biodiversity loss, so we talk about different plants and animals that live in an environment. If the biodiversity declines, it's usually because habitat was affected negatively. And Allie, this is what we kind of talk about through the whole biology section. Humans often, I think we should cross out the word often. We could put in always. Humans always have a negative impact on biodiversity. We do our best to kind of, try to help, but we're not very good at that. So habitat can be destroyed by human activities, farming, cities, mining, logging. Many efforts are now made to lessen the impacts in order to maintain biodiversity. Ecological management programs try to balance human progress with maintaining biodiversity. We replant clear-cut forests. So if you've ever been into the forests around Kelowna, you go into the forest, if it's been logged, then a few years after it's been logged, somebody will go through and plant trees to kind of help the forest regrow. The common practice of planting monocultures, only the most commercially valuable tree species, reduces the biodiversity of the forest. So when we log a forest, there's lots of species of trees that live there. When we replant, we usually only replant one, just because it's easier. So biodiversity, there you go. Anybody have any questions about anything that we discussed, talked about, anything to do with any of the symbioses, mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, predator-prey, kind of the important things we talked about today. Obviously, the stuff we talked about today is very heavy in vocabulary. We talked about ecosystems and biodiversity and mutualism, parasitism. Biology is really like that. It's very heavy in vocab, so you need to know these terms. I'm not encouraging you to sit down and try to memorize the terms, but some of the things you definitely do need to know, sort of definitions. So just be aware of that. That ends 1.2. Now, there isn't an assignment associated with this particular section, but you guys have your create a creature, which is going to be due at the end of the day tomorrow, so we can get it in for Thursday. We do have class again tomorrow, I believe first thing, so we're up at 9, and we'll jump into the next section of the biology unit, and we'll just continue on. I think there is a next section. Maybe there is no next 1.1, 1.2. I don't think we're done. We're not done, are we? Jeez. We're done. Is that done? Unit 1? So we went through all these notes today, some practice. That's it. All right. We'll talk about what we're going to do to wrap up this unit. We'll talk about it tomorrow. So I'm going to leave you guys there for now. We'll see you tomorrow. Remember, Thursday we have Experience OC, and we'll get some more information out about that tomorrow for you guys. And then Friday, I believe we're badmintoning again. So we'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Thanks.